Hello again, and welcome to my basement for the final portion of our lesson. This is lesson 4 in our 4-part unit of SAT preparation. Today we're going to do, which is by far the most challenging lesson of the 4, but SATs are hard, and you have to have varying degrees of knowledge and ability that it's going to test you on, so it's all important. And this is on literary criticism. The title of the lesson is, you can have a drum roll, How We Study the Writers. So ultimately, there's more to just studying the writers, that we actually have methods of criticism, and there are more than you could fill a book with every type of them, but we're focusing on 8 primary ones. So I would start the lesson by a little video about what we have learned so far. So this video, I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's just a teacher describing what literary criticism is. And then I'd have a fun little video about dealing with criticism, and this would just be like an ironic little, because when you hear criticism, you think somebody saying you're doing this wrong or you're doing that wrong, and then just correlating the two just to pique interest and start with a warm-up. So from then we would move into let me get my laptop together, the what have we learned so far, and I would recap some of the things we learned about the writers, about grammar, and I would ask how do you create that? Like, how do you evaluate it? And I'd see what some students say. And I would also, pick an essay or two from the previous day's homework about what I think criticism means. And I wouldn't want to feel and make anybody feel left out, but I would probably read the 2 that were closest to being accurate and read them to the class, and then further elaborate on what criticism actually entails. And it simply entails just evaluating a text from a certain standpoint, and it'll make more sense once we get the terms up on the board. And I would, if time permitted, I'd play another video, just because I don't want to be talking for 45 straight minutes and lose the student's interest. But right now I would pull up the 8 types of criticism that I'd want to focus on. And the ones we have so far are archetypal criticism, which it just shows that archetypes determine and form the function of literary works and text meaning, shaped by cultural and psychological myths. So that's a lot to unpack, but there's psychological myths. You could look into things like Freud and Oedipus complexes and some kind of dark things here, but that applies to a lot of Shakespearean texts, or to old Greek writing. A lot of those things, the Odyssey, the Iliad, they have things that definitely would fall under, you could easily come up with an archetypal criticism for. And then cultural criticism. So if we talked about To Kill a Mockingbird, somebody from the South would interpret this a lot differently than somebody from Canada, because it matches some of their own cultural beliefs or values, or ones at least they grew up with. Feminist criticism shows the ways in which literature reinforce or undermine the oppression of women. So, an interesting one I read was Edith Wharton's Age of Innocence. It depicts post-Civil War New York City, and just the way women were just property and objects back then. And this criticism from that, you could evaluate how the women felt how the men felt, why things were like that. Another one is psychoanalytic, and you're evaluating the unconscious desires and anxieties of the author. So that one, that could apply to, you could do that to Age of Innocence too. Just, what makes you think Edith Wharton wanted to write? What happened in her life that would make her want to write about post-war New York City's mistreatment of women? There's a lot of things to unpack there. And sorry, I know we're going fast. So Marxist places the literary work within the context of class and assumptions about class. We talked about George Orwell yesterday and Animal Farm. That depicts animals as working for a human, and they have an uprising, and then other animals take over and become oppressive just like the human. And there's definitely Marxist themes there that we could unpack. I have to sneeze. Excuse me. That's happened twice on these videos. So a formalist one, that's my favorite. That's when you take the actual components of the text and the styles and piece them together to try to understand. So you would look at something like Shakespeare, and you would look at his formats, the feet and the meters that he uses, and then you try to really glean a meaning from that. It's kind of hard, but it gets easier as you practice it. New historicism is a genre of discourse employed by literary critics used to share the results of their interpretive efforts. So that one's a newer one that critics use, where they take their interpretations of a text and state them based on historical elements, and they bounce them off of misconceptions and creating new ideas and stuff like that. And then post-structuralism, that's the final one. Similar to New Historicism, it builds upon and rejects ideas established by structuralism. So it's comparing and contrasting old and new, old ideas, new ideas, rejected ideas. You could kind of even apply it to something like Age of Innocence. A lot of these lenses are going to look more like prisms. You're going to find that a lot of them have multiple applications. So you could read a body of work from an author, and you might be able to criticize it from like 4 or 5 different angles. And that's what the summative assessment is going to be for this. We're going to take a simple, easy to read Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and we would read the 3 pages and evaluate the passage through a critical lens of your own choice. You could discuss how the girls are portrayed, how they're not portrayed, have a feminist. You could discuss the culture of the South. You could discuss the psyche of the characters. It's really whichever one interests you the most. And then from there, there's also a formative assessment that I have. It's a quiz, multiple choice. That's in the assessment portfolio. But this would be the end of the lesson, the end of the unit, and then the students would have to write a paragraph or 2 in Google Classroom describing what they learned from the unit and how they plan to equip it later. So, this was a lot to unpack, and it was kind of rapid fire, but we covered everything from basic grammar principles to literary criticism. I consider it like a crash diet of excuse me, thought I zoomed in. I consider it a crash diet of all the things you're going to need to know for an SAT. And I hope that students who took this unit and followed along with these lessons would be able to know what to study, what to look for, and would be able to succeed in taking their SAT. So, we covered a lot of ground. Sorry for jumping around so much, but I hope everybody was able to learn a little thing or two about some of the components of English, and I hope the assessments help. Thank you very much for following along, and I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye now.